As I said at the top of the show, we have three amazing teachers joining us today, and the first guest is the new 2019 North Carolina Boroughs Welcome Fund Teacher of the Year, Mariah Morris. Mariah, welcome to Education Matters.
Thank you.
So excited to have you here. I should also point out that Mariah is the first Moore County Schools teacher in the 40-year history of Teachers of the Year to win the awards. So congratulations to you and to Moore County. So you're a second grade teacher?
I am.
In Pinehurst?
I am.
How long have you been teaching?
This is my 10th year. I just finished up.
Okay. Now, when I talk to teachers, particularly when we bring in someone like our Teacher of the Year, I'm just kind of curious about kind of like your journey in teaching and education. I mean, when did you decide to become a teacher? Were you, did you have the, the stuffed animals and were being a teacher when you were a little girl?
A little bit, yeah. I decided I really wanted to be a teacher when I was in high school. So I had the privilege of growing up in a very diverse school in a very diverse neighborhood. And I'm from a very working class family that very much straddled the line between the different types of families in Durham. I grew up in urban Durham alongside people from all walks of life. And in that position, I was able to see the power of education in the lives of myself and my peers. Right. My parents pushed us no matter what to pursue an education. And that was a gift that nobody could take away from my brother or I. But I also saw peers in my neighborhood and friends at school who were born into cycles of poverty that made it very difficult to pursue education and to break that chain of poverty in their own life. And so I went into education as a call to social justice. Okay. And I went into education because I wanted to show students from all backgrounds that they can be in the driver's seat of their life and that they can write their own personal stories through education.
Well, what's interesting, you said you were really noticing those differences. I can't say that I was as cognizant of it. I grew up in Fayetteville and very much a working class blue collar family too. That I knew, I don't know, maybe we were all kind of in the same boat. It was a lot sort of a mill village kind of thing. But particularly now as I've gotten older and I had a child of my own in schools, you really do see a difference between kids who are coming in, let's say, ready to learn, and maybe they've already been in a more formal preschool. Is that something, I guess, both as a early career teacher and now, do you really see big sort of stark gaps between sort of where children are when they first enter school?
I most definitely do, and that's actually why I'm in second grade. I started as a high school English teacher, and I taught for 5 years at the high school level, and I thought that was what I wanted to do in education. And I realized that by the time students got to me, they were already on a track in life, and it was so hard to break that path by the time they got into their junior or senior year of high school. And so I decided I wanted to go to the younger grades. So I taught kindergarten and 5th grade ESL to kind of get my feet wet. And I realized by 5th grade, those decisions were already beginning to form. Right. And so I realized that the change I wanted to make in a student's life, it was really K-2 education. And now in 2nd grade, I'm starting to see it's even earlier than that.
Yeah, it is really, my sister's a kindergarten teacher now. She's taught kindergarten in 3rd grade. And yeah, you see, that's, now North Carolina, from a policy perspective, we talk a lot about K-3 and being ready to begin sort of like the grade level reading. And you're right, it's kind of hard to, it's kind of depressing in some ways to think that kids could already be so far behind by 3rd grade, but it really is, I guess, your experience that that's true.
That is right. And something that I work with my students and my families on understanding is that they're not necessarily behind, because what is the measure? We have to understand that tests are very much created by human beings, and so they're not perfect. And if we look at how a child develops throughout their whole life, beginning at birth, there's a difference, and there's variation, and there's a scale. And so students come into school without the same opportunities and are told that they're behind.
That's a really great
automatically.
Point. The kids are they're where they're where they are and where they're supposed to be
because they're children, and that's what I tell them, and that's what I tell the parents. They're not supposed to be a certain spot because they're 7 and 8, and they're supposed to be different, and that's what makes us all special, unique people. And so I work with my students on building their their self-confidence to understand that just because a certain test tells them that they're not as good as someone else, that's not true. That test was made by a human being who can make mistakes.
All right, let's talk a little bit about getting into teaching. You were a North Carolina Teaching Fellow.
I was.
At UNC Chapel Hill, which is where I went as well. Now, there's a new version of that program that's come back, different from the one that you went through, but how important was that program to you, and how important do you think programs like that are to encourage young people to go into teaching?
That program was very important to me. That program really made me the teacher I am today. I devoted my college career to the Teaching Fellows program. I took on leadership programs at Teaching Fellows. The director was one of my personal mentors, and I loved that program. We looked at all sorts of different issues in education. We had an annual conference, Let's Talk Race Conference, where we looked at racial inequalities in education, and that really set the stage for what type of teacher I wanted to be and understanding education from a broader perspective.
Right. You also talked about, I was there when you were announced. It's always an exciting time. But you mentioned also talking about science and math and STEM education. That's something that you're passionate about, incorporating that early on in school. Why?
Because the more I teach and the older I get, and as we continue on in our society into the 21st century, I realize that the language our students speak is the language of STEM. They are going to need to be proficient and knowledgeable in science, in technology, in engineering, and in math in order to be global citizens after they graduate, because they're going to be competing with students from all over the world with these skills. It used to be skills like literacy or traditional social studies, and those skills are still very much important. But if we want our students throughout North Carolina to be leaders in the global playing field after graduation, they have to have a solid STEM foundation in order to do so.
Right. You talked about social justice and poverty and the underserved. I mean, and you've written about it and you've spoken about it. Sort of what, I guess, what is your perspective on what else we need to be doing? I mean, there's only so many hours in the school day. As a state, as a community, as a nation, do you have some thoughts on sort of where children are today and things we should be doing differently?
I do. I think that it is very important to consider the whole child in education and to understand the diverse needs of diverse learners. I think that we need to address issues such as hunger in the schools. We need to address mental health issues, special education issues. We need to understand that each child brings unique strengths, but also weaknesses to the table. And some of those weaknesses are systematic because of systems of poverty at play in our society. And because they're systematic, we know how to address them. We know that a child is not going to perform at high rates if he or she is hungry. We know that a child is not going to be able to become the student he or she can be if he or she has mental health issues that are preventing learning. And these are big issues that span many, many students in many situations. And so I believe that we need more mental health professionals. I believe we need more nurses. I believe we need stronger programs for students such as English language learners or special education or students with autism to understand how to help these students be the best students they can be.
Great. Well, I think your teachers, your students are lucky to have you, and the North Carolina is fortunate to have teachers like you coming along. So we're looking forward to watching you over the next year as you become a sort of a spokesman for teachers across the state. So Mariah, thank you so much for coming to Education Matters. Very nice to meet you, and congratulations again.
Thank you.
All right, when we come back, we're going to be joined by two more rock star teachers, including last year's North Carolina Teacher of the Year. But before we go to break, see if you can answer this question. According to a new report from the Public School Forum of North Carolina, what percentage of North Carolina school districts have lower average teacher salaries than the reported state average teacher salary of $53,975?
Education Matters is brought to you each week in part by Paragon Bank, serving others, enriching lives.